Welcome, Bronco Nation, to my game review for Boise State versus Washington. Obviously not the result that we wanted in this matchup, but I'm going to talk about in this video what this loss means for Boise State. I'm going to look at the offense, the defense, and the special teams, and grade each of their performance and look at the intricacies of each of those and what happened in this matchup and how it will impact Boise State going forward. We're also going to grade my 3 keys to the game for Boise State and how well or how not well Boise State accomplished those. You'll notice, obviously, I'm not in my normal studio space. I'm on the road, and I also was today on baby duty, so I was looking after the kids, and I don't actually have all my notes from the game because I had 2 kids in my arms the whole time. So these are my notes post game, and my thoughts during the game. I've tried to capture those as well as possible. And you'll notice I'm trying to speak in a much more muted tone today because I just put the baby down. I'm hoping this doesn't wake him up. But we're gonna get into the pre-review. Don't take my lowered energy for a disappointment or a lack of passion in this team or a lack of faith in this team going forward, but just trying to keep it down so I don't wake up the kids. All right, so looking at the first off at the game overall, right? Boise State lost this matchup 19-56 blowout. Not something that a lot of us were expecting. Now, if you watched my 3 keys to the game, my preview video, you know that I was predicting a loss in this game, and I think most people were. I think of the Boise State media or analysts out there, Coach Sanford, former coach, offensive coordinator for Boise State, Coach Sanford, he was really the only one predicting a win in this matchup. This is his first season as just a fan, not being affiliated as a coach with any team, and I think maybe his fan side got a little bit the better of him on that. But obviously, this is a tough one for Boise State fans to take because it's such a big loss. Now, I said in my preview video that win or lose, Boise State's season, every single one of their goals is still on the line for them. You know, a win would have been huge. A win would have been program changing. It would have been, an establishment of Boise State back on the national stage. Boise State is back. They would have been like it was when Boise State beat Oregon in 2008, or when Boise State won the Fiesta Bowl in 2007. It would have been like those matchups past. But a loss for Boise State does not derail their season. This was a top 10 program. We need to, when we're analyzing the results of this game, we need to keep that in mind that this was a top 10 college football playoff champion contender with a Heisman finalist contender, preseason Heisman candidate contending for those major end of season goals that Boise State played against. And so everything that happened in this game has to be taken in account of that, and we'll talk about that in this video. But Boise State's loss here doesn't change anything. Just like I said in my preview video, a loss by Boise State in this game, it doesn't keep them from going and getting a Mountain West Championship victory, which is their biggest goal this season because they haven't done that yet under Andy Avalos. So going and getting a Mountain West Championship trophy. But also, Boise State's New Year's Six hopes are completely alive after this. This was a top 10 Washington team. It would have been nicer to keep this closer for postseason, down the road, looking at it as a quality loss is a pretty big blowout. But if Boise State, their entire season is still in their control, I 100% believe that a Boise State team that goes undefeated from this point, or maybe just loses one team from this point, and is a Mountain West champion, is going to be considered the strongest team, or at least be in contention to be the strongest team out of the group of 5 to go to the New Year's Six. So everything is on the line. So first off, I just want to say, don't panic. Boise State fans, I know that this is gutting as a Boise State fan because we don't do this. We're not Miami, Ohio, or some normal group of 5 program that goes out and gets crushed by a Power 5 for a payday. This wasn't a payday for Boise State. This was an opportunity for them to go out and compete on the national stage like they always do, or how Boise State fans expect them to. And so this is devastating for a Boise State fan to have this kind of loss. But again, this is a third-year program under a new head coach. The third year is when you're still trying to develop everything on the program. You're finally starting to get your starters in place. There you have a brand new offensive coordinator in place, which I think showed, and we'll talk about that as well. You lost a ton of strength on the defense. You have a very young quarterback first ever time starting a season opener, and on a major scale. This is a program that is still rebuilding. They're not back yet, and I don't think anybody truly expected them to be back yet. So Boise State has a lot of growing up still to do, and there are some positives that we can draw from this. There's also some negatives I think we can improve on, but there are a lot of positives to draw from this game. So before we get into the video, I wanted to set the stage for the fact that we need to have the right perspective on this. Our team is still out there competing for everything that they were before we kicked off versus Washington. Yeah, we're not going to have the national headlines that a win versus Washington would bring, but a loss to them, even a bad one like this, does not do anything to derail the season in any way. So first off, calm down, reset. Let's talk about this video. Let's talk about this game in this video. Let's get through this, move on, and face UCF next week. So looking at the offense first overall. So offense overall, some stats to point out is Taylor Green started off really, really well for them. Had a really nice first drive, came in strong, and then just things started to fall apart. 19 of 39, 244 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Also to note, only 5 rushes for 31 yards. That is something we're going to talk about here in a second. But when you have a quarterback of Taylor Green's athletic abilities and he only rushes for 5 yards for 31 yards, I mean, RG3 kept calling for them to put him out on the run where his legs are, where his strength is. And they were almost making him a pocket passing quarterback, which is not what Taylor Green is. He had some nice scrambles, but there were almost no designed runs for Taylor Green in this matchup. And I think that was a major mistake that we'll talk about here in a second. Looking at the running game more in depth, Helani, only 10 carries, 5.5 yard average for 51 yards. Genty, again, only 10 carries, 4.4 yard average with a touchdown and 44 yards. The thing is that Boise State was, when they did choose to run, were doing it effectively. You know, nearly 5 yards a carry by the running backs. But Boise State in the first half only had 10 carries by the running backs. That is what shocks me the most about it. I am absolutely shocked by the offense that we saw today. Not necessarily the execution of the offense, but the offensive style. Because everything we heard, and not just, me, but insiders, reporters for Boise State, everything that they heard from the coaches, that they saw in practice, the natural logical assumptions that come from what you have on your roster, the strengths on your roster in your run game, everyone thought that this was going to be a run-heavy offense. Even the reporters, the game day crew today were talking about how Bush Hannon was brought in because of his experience in the run game to focus on the run game for Boise State. And Boise State in the first half, this is before they had to start slinging it all over the place to try and get back. In the first half, only 10 carries by running backs. They came out slinging and they kept on doing. The running game was sprinkled in more as a break to the passing game than a focus of the offense. This was almost an air raid style attack that Boise State ran today, and that is truly shocking. Now, that air raid style attack that they went with was not necessarily a bad call. As far as the play calls themselves were not bad calls, they were just poorly executed. And that's because Boise State has a very experienced passing game. They have a bunch of wide receivers, none of who have long-term experience for this program. Most of them are young faces that have very, very limited experience for Boise State, and none of them have proven themselves to be that number one step-up wide receiver. Nobody on this roster has stepped up as that next, Khalil Shakir type wide receiver for Boise State. And we saw that last season where Boise State's top wide receiver had less than 600 yards, and he's not even playing because he's injured right now. So you have a very, very young, untested wide receiver core that Boise State came out throwing at with a quarterback whose strength is not in the passing game. That's something that he has that he can develop into. I do believe that is part of his game, but his main strength, the thing that he is the best at, the thing that puts him at another level of quarterback play is his legs, is his running abilities. I absolutely believe that Taylor Green can throw the ball and that he can develop into an efficient, strong passing quarterback, but he has got to combine that with his legs, because you are having his potential if you only take his arm into account in the game. And also, when all Washington has to do is drop back into the pass with an inexperienced wide receiver core and a quarterback who's not used to slinging it around, it's going to be a very, very long, hard day for the offense, and that's what we saw. Boise State came out they only completed passes to 5 players in this game, 2 of whom were running backs. The leading receiver for Boise State was Ashton Genty, 4 receptions for 109 yards and a touchdown. He played outstanding today. I wish that he had been given more action. 4 receptions, 10 carries, 14 touches. That's it for Ashton Genty. George Helani, 10 carries, 2 receptions, 12 carries. So between your top 2, probably your top 2 players in the entire offense, if you're not talking about the quarterback, as far as your players outside the quarterback, your top 2 players on the offense, between the 2 of them only combined for 20 carries and 6 receptions, 26 touches between your 2 top offensive weapons. That's unacceptable. I don't understand the game plan that came in with that focus. And then they were only able to complete passes to 3 receivers, McAllister, Cobbs, and Bowens, and there were so many drops, even among McAllister and Cobbs, who had nice catches. Cobbs had a great deep ball reception on that first, or was the second drive come down for the touchdown. And McAllister had some really nice grabs early and at the end, but in between, there were at least 4 significant drops that I counted between McAllister and Bowens, and a bunch of drops amongst everybody else as well. So this was a very interesting game plan. Did Boise State not execute it properly? Yes, they had opportunities to complete them. The play calls themselves would have worked if Boise State had been able to complete them. If the passes, which most of the time were pretty close to being on target, they were definitely catchable balls, had been caught, Boise State being able to advance on the field, they would have worked. But when you're an offensive coordinator, you have to look at the weapons that you have, and you say, we have the greatest trio of rushers we've ever had in school history, and we have probably the most inexperienced, weakest wide receiver core, and I don't mean weakest as in their talent level isn't there. They definitely have a high ceiling, but right now, where their experience and where they're at right now in their playing abilities, because they have to be developed into that, and it comes from game experience. So overall, your passing game, your wide receivers are probably the weakest you ever had in school history. So you take a passing game that is the most uncertain you've ever had, and a running game that is the strongest you've ever had, and then you go 47 pass attempts to only 28 rush attempts. 47 pass attempts to 28 rush attempts. Now, again, there was a lot of stuff in the end there where Boise State was forced in a position where they had to throw the ball. But the reason they were there was because they didn't put themselves in a position where they could go to nice long drives together where whether you score or not, at least you prevent Washington from having multiple opportunities to score. Washington scored almost every time they had the ball. The first half, Boise State stopped them from scoring 4 out of the 8 times, and the second half, they scored 4 out of the 5 times. We'll talk about the defense later. But Washington, anytime you gave them the ball, you knew that they were going to have an opportunity to go down and score. So limiting their touches was going to be key, and a big part of that was going to be Boise State's ability to extend drives, obviously, but also when you were going through your drives, to grind it down as long as possible, to slow it down so your defense had a chance to break and to rest. And Boise State only had a couple of drives that were longer than 4 minutes. They only had one drive that was longer than 4 minutes. The rest of the drives, the vast majority of the drives, including their scoring drives, were right around 2 minutes, 2 minutes 30. I mean, that's a 2-minute offense. Boise State was supposed to come out here and put together a slow, eat it up, 5-7 minute drive offense that would limit Washington's chances to score and give Boise State's defense plenty of time to rest while Boise State goes out and has opportunity to put up points and to grind down this Washington defense and become stronger in the second half. Washington became stronger in the second half because Boise was exhausted because they've been running this passing offense the whole time. So it's not that, there was creativity in the passing game, not in the running game. There was creativity in the passing game, and the offensive play calls would have worked. So it's not a fact that the offense that was run ineffectively in the play calling. The execution was ineffective, but the play calling was there. It wasn't an issue with that. But the problem was the fact that play calling was chosen in the first place. The reason it wasn't executed effectively was because the players were not set up for success by running to their strengths. Taylor Green should have had far more quarterback run plays. The running game was very uninspired. When Boise State did run the ball, it was a lot of, simple, zone plays or just kind of pounded up the middle. There was not a lot of creativity in the running game. The running backs did a great job of taking what was given to them and making something out of it, but there was not a lot of creativity in the running game, and that's what I expected. I expected the creativity that we saw in the passing game implemented in the running game, and it didn't happen in this matchup. So very interesting start here for Boise State. And again, you play to the team's strengths, or you play to your opponent's weaknesses and what you think your team's strengths are going to be able to match up against your opponent's weaknesses. But at the end of the day, you have to have an offensive identity. And this team's offensive identity right now looks like a balanced attack, but pass-focused offense. And that is a very interesting choice. There must be something that is being seen in practice that was not seen on the field today, and maybe it's the first game jitters and it's going to be different going forward. But Boise State going out with this offensive style, I was very, very surprised. So overall for Boise State, on this offense, I'm going to give them a D+. Because while there were some opportunities there, they did score 19 points. Overall, it was a failure of execution of the game plan and also a very interesting decision and maybe potentially a detrimental decision to go with the game plan that was chosen. Now, I will say the one positive before we move on to defense is the offensive line does seem to have improved. It wasn't like he had, miles of time, hours back there like Penix did for Washington, but there was enough time to get the ball off in most scenarios, except for when Washington was bringing the house on like a third down kind of situation where they were going to be bringing the blitz. There were opportunities in like maybe a screen pass situation. But for the most part, there was time to throw the ball. When Boise State ran the ball, except for when they just ran it right up the middle, there was space being made for the running back. So it seems like the offensive line has improved. I'm not saying that they're a great unit overall yet. I'm not saying that they're going to be a super strong unit for this team yet. I think there's still some development that needs to be made. But as far as what they've been previously the last 3-4 seasons, which is just really, really, really bad, this offensive line definitely seemed to have taken a step forward in this game, and that is definitely positive for this program. All right, we're going to look at the defense and special teams real quick, because I think the biggest issue overall in this game was the offense. The defense, for me, started off the game really strong, and I think would have played much stronger if the offense had given them something to work with. This defense, for me, reminded me of the BYU game in 2020, where Boise State couldn't get anything going on offense. The defense played relatively well in the first half, and in the second half just got pounded into the dirt because they were exhausted. There was that sense that of futility that creeps in, that you know that it doesn't, they're going to pick it up, or that even if you stop them, they're going to come down. Your offense is going to be able to do anything. You're going to have to face them again in a few minutes. So I think the defense, as the game wore on, got just ground down with the pace of Washington and the fact that the offense was not being able to keep up and keep this a close game. The defense gave Boise State plenty of opportunities. Again, like I said, in the first half, Washington scored, but they only scored on 50%. Again, that's a pretty good percentage, 4 touchdowns in the first half, but Boise State was able to stop them 4 out of 8 times and give their offense a chance. The issue is that in the second half, Washington scored on 4 out of their 5 possessions, almost every single one down the stretch. And again, that part of that was just the continuing fatigue, mistakes being made, the drop passes, a punt that you almost stop at the half-yard line, it doesn't stop. All of this drives in, and the unit that feels that the most is the defense, which is fighting for their life every time they step on the field, versus an offense, which is going to be a great offense. Washington, I don't think anybody's out there saying that they're like a top 5 defense in the country, but offensively, this is one of the best passing attacks in the nation. So the fact that Boise State got torn down by them is not necessarily a massive negative for this program. 568 total yards for Washington. Penix 29 of 40 for 450 yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 picks. If he was inaccurate at any time, it was usually an overthrow where nobody had a chance to go get it. There was really no opportunities to go out and get an interception in this matchup. Boise State's front 7, though, only allowed 100 yards rushing. They did allow 2 touchdowns on the ground, one of those kind of coming in garbage time. But overall, Boise State's front 7 really impressed me. We saw that early in the matchup where Boise State was able to stop 3-and-out Washington, and then consistently throughout the rest of the game, when Washington tried to mix up and run, they broke a couple here and there. But overall, Boise State was very, very strong in the front 7, which is what I expected. This defense overall is in a massive rebuild, especially the secondary, but also the linebackers. And we lost Noah in the front 7. You lost Matlock, you lost Obucherry, and you lost a bunch of other guys, Cravens. So the front 7 is also in a rebuild, but Boise State's front 7 and their linebacker core looked really, really strong today. And part of that is all the transfers that came in for Boise State. And also part of that is Andrew Simpson having an amazing game. Got the sack for Boise State right off the bat. I think he's going to be a very, very special player for this program. I was also very impressed, which I've been talking him up this whole time, and I was very impressed by his play, Jay Oladipo. So there were guys that impressed me today, and even guys that made mistakes or led up big plays like Tubner. Also, he led the game in tackles and had some great moments as well. everybody on this roster defensively had great moments. It's just that they also allowed some major plays. They really continued to have an issue with the deep ball. That was something we saw last year when Boise State played competent quarterbacks, especially opening up versus Oregon State. But anytime Boise State played a quarterback that had an arm and a wide receiver, and at least a wide receiver to tie in with that arm, Boise State was struggling to stop the deep pass, and that has not changed. Boise State still could not stop the deep pass today. Now, again, one of the best quarterbacks in the country, the second leading passer coming back from last season, the top in the Power 5, almost 5,000 yards passing last season, and it looks like he's on track to match or break those numbers this year. Fantastic Heisman-level quarterback, okay? Also, three of the best wide receivers that Boise State will face all season long. 3 wide receivers for Washington, over 90 yards, 2 of them over 100 yards. Boise State really struggling to stop those 3 guys. You can clamp down on a couple, but you're not going to be able to stop all 3. And one of them in particular, Udunzu, I think I said it right that time, but he was unstoppable. Anytime that the ball went his way, he pretty much caught it. He was not able to be defended. 6'3", 211-pound guy. I mean, future NFL, probably first round, early second round, or first round guaranteed draft pick. This is a guy that Boise State is probably not. They're not going to face another wide receiver or set of wide receivers like that of that caliber all year long until potentially, maybe depending on who they play in the bowl season. So for Boise State, when you're analyzing the secondary's performance, which again, I thought early on in the game they were pretty strong. It was when they got worn down over and over again that they started to give up more and more and more. Overall, I thought the secondary played pretty well. It's just going up against a team like this, they're going to look terrible, and I think comparatively they could have looked worse. So the secondary for me, again, the defense overall for me keys off of the offense, and it was the inability of the offense to do anything that caused this game to snowball. For the majority of this matchup, this was a 2-possession game, and it wasn't because the offense was doing a great job of going down to scoring. Boise State only had 12 points in the half, but it was because the defense, while giving up big plays, was also doing something to keep Boise State in this game. It was only when hope expired that the defense started to really tumble there at the end. So for Boise State defensively, it's going to be a bad grade because they gave up so many yards, because they couldn't stop the deep ball, which is a continued trend from last season. Trend items are always going to hurt a grading of a unit because it's something that should have been fixed, and it's not, even though, again, you're going up against some great players. But overall, for Boise State, they kept it close, 2-possession game for most of the matchup. It was only right there when Washington went down and scored that second to last touchdown where it really started to tumble out of control. So C+ overall, but I don't see the defense being as big an issue in this game, even though their point total, 56 points and all the yards, is bad. I don't see them being as big an issue as the offensive execution. I saw a lot of hope in this defense. For a defense that I didn't have huge expectations for, they at least met or exceeded my expectations for this unit. And what I saw out of some of these younger guys on the field today has been a lot of hope for me going forward this season. Like I said, I think if we played Washington in week 6, this would have been a very, very different matchup from at least a defensive point of view. And I stand by that statement after seeing what I saw today from this defense. So this defense is going to get better. I think the secondary has a lot of super great athletes that are some potential future stars for this program. I think that the secondary is going to get there. Just first matchup, you lost a ton of guys, ton of corners, top safeties. Jail Skinner's presence definitely missed today. You lost some great names back there in your secondary. It's basically a completely rebuilt unit. It's tough to come up against a team this good and play well, and I think that's why we saw the negative impact on the defense today. So C+ overall, but again, I don't blame them the most for this loss in the matchup. Not that anyone is to blame, it's a team loss, but I don't see their performance today as the biggest negative from this performance. I did see some strong positives out of that unit. Looking at the special teams, now this is a unit that is not something that we have to pull the positives from the negatives. And obviously, missed PAT, that's bad. Gave a big kick return, that's bad. But overall, this was a really strong performance for the Boise State special teams. I was super excited to come out and see the performance of the Boise State special teams unit overall perform so well. Now, we'll talk about the negatives real quick because I want to get through those and get to the positives. Gave up big kick return, 51 yards, but overall only allowed 19.6 yard average on kick returns. Boise State couldn't do anything in the kick return game. They had 0 punt returns. So that is something that Boise State needs to look at from last season. That's a trend item as well. Boise State didn't really have a strong return game, and it looks like, at least versus Washington, maybe it'll be better as the season goes on, but at least starting off week 1, that return game issue has not been fixed. However, overall, Boise State kicking game, 1 missed PAT, didn't end up mattering, but 2 made field goals for Jonah Dalmez. Remember last season when he started versus Oregon State, he missed a ton of field goals off the bat. Here, perfect to start the season on field goals, got those kicks under his belt. I think he is kicking for the record this year, trying to beat Kyle Brotzman's numbers. I think it's like 13 kicks he has to make to gain the record and be the #1 kicker in school history, at least by made field goals. So he has something to prove this season to go out and gain that final record as the best kicker in program history. And he started off strong. Missed PAT, recovered from that, came back, made both of his field goal attempts. One was missed, but there was a foul that moved running into the kicker, which was a great job by him to keep himself in a position where he would be ran into, and then he made the second kick. So 2 out of 2, great job by him. Kick return we already talked about. Boise State only allowed 3.3 yards average on punt return and only 19.6 yard average on kick return. So both of those are strong. But the highlight, the player of the game, offense, defense, or special teams, was James Ferguson Reynolds. Oh my goodness, what a performance. This was a guy that I said last season was the most improved from beginning to end of the year. Taylor Green also in that category, but between those two, the most improved players. James Ferguson started off the year not so strong, finished really, really well, and I was hoping that after a full offseason development with American football, of course an Aussie rules guy, that he would come in strong and be the player that I was so excited for him to be when he was recruited, because those Aussie kickers, they combine the accuracy and the strength because they're used to playing that Aussie rules football, which it uses the kicking as almost like a passing attempt. So I love Aussie kickers, and seeing him come out and perform the way that he did in this matchup was outstanding. Definitely the highlight for me. 7 punts, long of 62, averaged 15.1 yard average per punt. 52 yards, over 52 yards per punt average overall. What, on 7 punts? That is really, really hard to do. That was an incredible performance by him. That alone gives the special teams unit an A overall. I thought the special teams did a great job. I thought their punt return coverage was fantastic. I was excited. I liked the fact that the kicking game was able to recover after the missed PAT and make both their field goals, and that Boise State's kick return coverage after the first kick return was pretty good overall as well. But what excited me on this was the punting. Punting in this game was a masterclass in punting by James Ferguson Reynolds, and I am so excited to see what he can do the rest of the season. I think he could be kicking for best punter in the Mountain West this season. I absolutely believe that after this performance, he might get special teams player of the week for the Mountain West. Fantastic job. So definitely A overall for the special teams unit, and a big part of that towards James Ferguson Reynolds. But overall, positive out of this game was the special teams was pretty good. So we're gonna wrap up real quick because I'm approaching 30 minutes, and I try to keep these right at 30 minutes. But grading my keys: release a 3-headed rushing attack, F. Boise State did not focus on the running game at all. The rushing game was almost incidental to the matchup itself. Did not use Taylor Green's legs effectively. Definitely a interesting decision to go with that play style. Aggressive defense, that's something I didn't really talk about when I was talking about the defense. Boise State for most of the game was only bringing 3. When they did bring pressure, they weren't necessarily getting the quarterback besides that first play, but they were rattling him a little bit and forcing some hurried throws. He wasn't necessarily going for the deep ball. He was being forced to go short, and some of those were incompletions. And I really think Boise State should have focused on bringing that pressure. They knew they weren't going to stop these guys. You can't double cover 3 wide receivers, and if you give him enough time, he's going to find someone. And the more time you give him, the further that pass is going to be down the field. And I really think Boise State should have come in with a heavier, more focused sack-focused defense in this matchup, trying to really bring the blitz in a lot more of these plays, like they did in that first series when they 3-and-outed Washington. So aggressive defense overall, I'm going to give it D-. And then take the points. Boise State came down. They tried 2 field goals where they could have gone for touchdowns in kind of a desperation scenario, or gone for the 4th down attempt in desperation scenario. They kept themselves in the game. They took the field goal there at the end of the half. They kept themselves there. It's just they weren't able to finish in the end. So A+ overall and take the points. I like that thought process, and I'm hoping that goes forward the rest of the season here for Boise State. So thanks so much for watching. If this was your first time watching a game review video from me, I promise that they're usually a little bit more organized because I have all my notes from the game and they're in my studio and the lighting's better, and it's not like this. So make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you keep around for all those going forward game reviews. So thanks so much for being here. Let me know what your thoughts are on the new intro video as well. That's something I'm adding to my channel. Always trying to improve and get better, like this Boise State team going forward the rest of the season. But again, everything is still on the line. There's so much to look forward to for this Boise State team. I can't wait for the UCF matchup. I'm going to be there in person. Finally getting to go to a Boise State game. I always try to make one a season, and this was the one I'm making this year. So I'm really, really excited to be able to get up to Boise for this UCF matchup. So come find me if you see me around. And thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. And as always, and again, a little muted because I got the baby next door, but go